Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Conversation of Our Generation. My name is Nate Jamel, and this is where we are solving the problems of today with the wisdom of the past. And today we will be reviewing The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. And I think this is a prophetic work, not just because it described a problem that was kind of in seed form that would later grow into a very viney weed that's just wrapping around everything today, but also because the prophecy predicts the end result of where this logically where this is going. C.S. Lewis sees the implications of what was happening early on in this grammar textbook, and sees how much really down the road this idea that they were kind of planting seeds, even unknowingly potentially, would grow into something that's really destructive and very inhuman in a lot of ways. And that's what we're going to talk about, is what that tactic that he noticed happening. And then furthermore, we're going to dive into what the problem itself is a little bit and talk some about that, because I think that this is a very hard book to understand. I think personally, I definitely had to reread a lot of parts, and I plan on rereading the whole thing again just to fully grasp it. But I think I have a pretty good understanding, but I think there's a lot more there that I could uncover. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is that book from C.S. Lewis. And before I dive too far into all of that, I want to remind you that you can find me on conversationofourgeneration.com for more stuff. You can go to Twitter at @ConOfOurGen. You can find me there, facebook.com/conversationofourgeneration. And right now, I know you're doing a lot of shopping on Amazon, probably for Christmas and everything, or Hanukkah potentially. And I just want to say that if you go to conversationofourgeneration.com/Amazon-affiliate, if you go there and click the link that takes you to Amazon, that will help me. Any shopping that you do then and whatever you buy just helps me out. It's a referral page, easy for you to do, doesn't hurt. And then also, if you're interested in any of these books, use the links that I share to buy them if you're going to, because I try to find good deals. I try to also find the right book and all of that, make sure that it's a good publisher. And so I put a time into figuring out that this is a good link to go through and find. And so there's that, but also, again, it helps me out and supports the conversation for our generation. And then last, if you're listening to this and you're not a subscriber, definitely subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this on the podcast, and leave a good rating and review as well, or like and comment as well on YouTube if you're liking what I'm doing here as well. So with that, let's hop over to the quote of the week. And so this one is from Abolition of Man. And this is kind of near, I'll explain the quote. We'll read the quote and I'll explain it, and we can talk about it a little bit more. So he says, until quite modern times, all teachers and even all men believed the universe to be such that certain emotional reactions on our part could be either congruous or incongruous to it. Believed, in fact, that objects did not merely receive, but could merit our approval or disapproval, or reverence or our contempt. And so I think that is really demonstrating the break between sort of the Aristotelian, Thomistic underpinnings of much of our philosophy that we had, and saying that kind of there's this modernist push, or even postmodernist push, to say, no, we are just putting our expression into the world. We are just seeing ourselves in the world. There's nothing in the world that is meritorious in and of itself. And whether that's of something evil or of something good, right? A beautiful sunset, that's kind of the example that starts the book that we'll talk a little bit about potentially, but I also don't want to fully just give everything away either. But like a sunset, for instance, can be beautiful, and it's not just us imprinting our feelings upon what we're seeing. No, there's actual, I think this is where the whole idea of objective beauty comes from, is that there's actually something beautiful about it, that it shares in something, some real quality of beauty, and that's objectively there, and then we recognize it. And so when we say that a sunset is beautiful, we are saying that we are acknowledging something that the sunset has within it, right? If we say that a tree is strong, it's not just, well, I guess that's more of a descriptor. but even then, I think that it would be similar, that, or that that tree is in and of itself strong, and we can recognize that. I think that that's actually something that we do recognize, and we're not imprinting our impressions of what strong is onto the tree. But when it comes to beauty or some other qualities, good, right, that that's sort of, I think a lot of people don't want to make those qualitative judgments anymore. And the shying away from that, and the way that these teachers do it in the book, really undermines the ability to make any quality judgments about anything. And that's, I think, a problem. And I really think that he makes a good point that until quite modern times, all teachers and even all men believed the universe to be such that certain emotional reactions on our part could be either congruous or incongruous to it. Yes, so my example of the tree was not in line with what he's talking about here, obviously. But I think that that idea that basically everyone understood this until recently is a good example, not a good example, a good indicator that maybe we should not just throw that idea away willy-nilly, right? We can't just do it and not worry about what the consequences might be. And we can't just do it without really diving into the logical conclusions of what we would be moving towards if we got rid of this idea. And so that's the exploration that C.S. Lewis takes you in Abolition of Man, is what happens if we do give in to this idea. And so let's talk a little bit about that. So for the problems in education that he discusses, so basically what happens is Lewis begins this book by calling out people, a couple of authors of a grammar book. He keeps them anonymous and the book anonymous, but he does it for not teaching grammar poorly. Rather, he points out that the grammar book was sort of teaching a worldview when they should have been explaining the rules of language. And instead, they were directing students' word choice in a peculiar way. And so they don't just point out an issue with grammar in this passage. What they do is explain why it's wrong the way the language is used. And so that's really the issue. And so I'm going to pull up the passage here. It was actually if you're following me on Twitter, I tweeted this out yesterday to see if anyone could guess what we were reviewing. And what they talk about is basically what's happened is there was a story of Coleridge seeing I think it was a waterfall. Yeah, a waterfall. And he said, two people described it. One said it was pretty and one said it was sublime. And he was angry that the person said it was pretty because that did not, the waterfall was more than just pretty, right? And he says that sublime was a good way of describing it, much better way. And so what this grammar textbook says is actually, he was not making a remark about the waterfall, but a remark about his own feelings. What he was saying was really, I have feelings associated in my mind with the word sublime, or shortly, I have sublime feelings. Here are a good many deep questions settled in a pretty summary fashion. But the authors are not yet finished. They add, this confusion is continually present in language as we use it. We appear to be saying something very important about something, and actually we are only saying something about our own feelings. Tell me that that does not describe the world we are in today. when you say there is this really important thing that we need to know, and they say, no, that's just really important to you, right? Or I'm making a qualitative judgment about the world around me or about a behavior that someone does. Well, who are you to say that that's just your feelings on the matter? Okay, so what if my feelings are right? What if my feelings are the ones that are congruous with the universe, as Lewis describes? What if that's what if I'm actually right about that? What if there is an objective reality that I am in I am congruous with and you are incongruous, to use C.S. Lewis's words? What if? I think that this is the problem that we have today with postmodernism, and I think he saw postmodernism being born right there in this grammar textbook and others around him, because I don't know, I mean, it really develops, I guess I should say, out of the same time that C.S. Lewis was growing up and working and writing, is really the post World War I era that you start to move from like this modernist idea to this postmodernist idea, where we start to shy away from the objective reality because we see, well, just a lot of reasons. I can't dive into all of them, but that's what we start to see here. And so what I think we find is that in this passage, they assert that we merely explain how we feel about something instead of being able to recognize that quality in an inanimate object, right? To say that something is beautiful, like I said, is to recognize beauty in an object. And I think that that is really the problem that he hammers hard on this. But what does that lead to? And so this is where the abolition of man comes in. Basically, the idea is that there's sort of this, he doesn't put it this way, but a scientific religion based on man's conquest of nature. That's the goal. That's the epitome, is for man to conquer nature. And while he doesn't use those terms, he shows that we often think of technology as progress, giving us the airplane. I don't actually know what the wireless is or what wireless he means, but contraceptive as well, as examples of technological improvements that show we are conquering nature. Man is triumphing over nature. And but he also shows that this reliance on technology is not actually conquering anything, right? It's a few people who create these new technologies, and most people are just reliant on them, right? One person or a few people created the pill. Two guys created an airplane, right? These are the people who are conquering things, if you can say that, even that they're conquering nature in any way, not realizing that man is a part of nature. So when you conquer nature, rather, you sort of, I don't know. We can walk it through that in a minute, but I don't want to go too far on that. But basically, what he says is basically, here's how he sums it up. If I pay you to carry me, I am not therefore myself a strong man, he says. If I pay you to create technology for me, I therefore am not an innovator, right? You could just say it just like that. I am not the person creating the technology, so I'm not the one who's out there conquering nature. I'm just kind of sitting idly by, as other people might be doing something like that, but I'm not. And rather than liberating man from nature, we've really sort of enslaved a lot of people to this technology. And we can see that, I think, very, very clearly now, the way that we have a few people creating very addictive apps, and we have 3 different choices for your phone that rules your life, basically, and all of that. And so instead of really mastering nature, we've reduced ourselves in a lot of ways to the same level as the nature we wish to conquer. We study rocks and grasses and all of these different things, and we sort of put it in this box, and we look at this part and that part, and we can describe all the little intricacies of cellular growth or in grass or the molecular composition of rocks, but we don't appreciate the whole thing, is basically what C.S. Lewis says. We get all into the nitty gritty, and we forget to just appreciate, maybe that's a cool thing. Maybe that's a beautiful part of God's creation. And then we go even further along and we start studying people. If you look at the sociology world, we are just studying people in that way. We've treated people like animals in the pursuit of studying more about the human condition. We have. The Nazis did. Even American government has done stuff that is terrible in that regard. We've allowed very, very bad scientific experiments to happen on people. We've done it all across the world. All different types of people have done these things. And when you do that, now what are we conquering? If we are studying human beings the same way we do a rock, what nature have we conquered then at that point? All we've done is reduce man to the same level as a rock or a blade of grass or anything else that we study under a microscope. And what C.S. Lewis says here, I don't have the quote here, but he says basically, when we look for an explanation, we don't look for an explanation. We look rather to explain away. And you can't just keep on explaining away forever. Eventually, you explain away explanation itself, he says. And that's where, again, where we are, where, okay, we're explaining away this and that and this and that. And then all of a sudden, you just can't assert anything that's not your truth, your relativistic idea of the world. And I think that that's a serious problem that we have in our culture today. And so if you want to dive more into these ideas, if you want to learn more about what C.S. Lewis has to say about this and not just my brief synopsis, definitely check out Abolition of Man. If you can buy it through the links that I have in the show notes, if you're on YouTube, you can find it in the description below, and it'll be basically anywhere on the website, in the show notes, everything there. So definitely buy it through my links if you can. That really helps me out and supports the conversation of our generation. Also follow on Twitter at @ConOfOurGen or Facebook.com/conversation of our generation. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to it. If you're on the website listening, go over to conversationofourgeneration.com/podcast and you can see everywhere there, but just pull up your player and search Conversation of Our Generation and subscribe. And YouTube there, same thing. Hit the subscribe wherever, I don't know where the bell is or wherever that stuff is in relation to me on the video, or I would point to it. But definitely subscribe still there, and like, comment, all those things to just get this out there a little bit more and get more people involved in the conversation of our generation. So thanks for listening to this episode of the Conversation of Our Generation. Let's get the dialogue going. I'll talk to you next time.